So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you to our closing keynote speech of Digital Freedom Festival today. And let me introduce you with Bill Liao, Australian entrepreneur who lives in Ireland at the moment and who goes to Helsinki tomorrow and who is here in Riga today. And what Bill will talk about, he will talk about meaningful investment. Because, and as we said already, maybe money cannot buy happiness, but money could be very important incentive to make things happen, right? Or not to make things happen. Bill is entrepreneur. He has founded several unicorn startups, and he's also investor. And at the moment, he's general partner of SOSV, top 1 seed investment company in the world. So if you want to get some money, but as we know, we never ask investors directly that I want money, but you can definitely talk to Bill during these days. Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello. Growing up in Australia, I was sick a lot of the time. And that meant I had a lot of time off school. And that meant I read a lot of science fiction. And I mean a lot of science fiction. And what I can tell you is that the world that occurred for me growing up, especially the tech world, was really disappointing. You know, I got my first computer when I was 12, and it did nothing useful. Now, I got really good at programming it, but I couldn't make it do anything useful because it couldn't talk to anything. When I was 12, I'm 50 now, there was no internet. There weren't any mobile this or mobile that. And so I spent a lot of my life deeply frustrated with technology. And as I moved into the workforce, I dropped out of high school, so I didn't get into a very good job to start with. I got more and more frustrated with technology. And then one day, all that changed. And what changed was really quite interesting. At that point, having read a lot of science fiction, I was a dreadful nerd. Now, how do you get nerd cred? You get nerd cred by knowing lots of facts and regurgitating those facts with strong opinions. And if you can use facts and your opinions to beat your nerd opponent, that's your nerd cred. That was me. I try very hard not to do that anymore. So pardon me if I do share some facts and some opinions. I promise I'll try and keep them minimal. So imagine me as a nerd, not doing too well, and my wife goes to a meeting of an organization called the Hunger Project. Right? The Hunger Project is a very interesting charity, and you should look it up if you're interested in empowering women and ending poverty. Anyway, she came back from the Hunger Project meeting and she said, Bill, there's this amazing project and they're giving, opportunities to village women around the world and they're transforming them into entrepreneurs, and I've just pledged $5,000 to them. And we had our first child on the way then, and we were 30 grand in credit card debt, so that wasn't okay. And she said, you've got to come see them. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to come see them, all right. Can I go tomorrow? Right, so I'm going in there, I'm really pissed off. And this was in Melbourne, and they brought 3 village women from India who had never seen electricity before. And these 3 village women spoke passionately about the projects they were committed to transform their villages and their future. And I was in tears most of it, right? And I went up to the leader of the Hunger Project in India, Lalita, and I said, look, Lalita, this is fantastic, but I got to come clean here. My wife's pledged $5,000. I don't have $5,000. And Lolita asked me this question. She said, look, Bill, who would you have to become in order to make that pledge work without suffering on your part? And then this is a very important distinction. Without suffering on my part, right? Because you can ask someone to do something, and if they're going to suffer a lot doing it and it's not in their interest, that's manipulation. Don't do that. But if you inspire someone to do something and they do not suffer because of it, that is meaningful inspiration. And that's powerful. And I got this vision of me in a different world where I could just hand over a check and not worry about it to an organisation like the Hunger Project. I quit my job the next day. I learned how to sell, and I haven't looked back since. I actually pledged $50,000, and in just about 18 months I delivered $100,000. I changed the way I was living life. But not because I wanted the money, but because I'd found something meaningful to put my attention to. Now, we're supposed to talk a little bit about investment, and I am going to talk about investment. I'm going to tell you a couple of things about it. One of the things I'm going to tell you is, if you're going to get money from an investor, ask for advice. Right? If you ask investors advice and you take that advice and implement it, and it works, it's a very good way to get them to give you money. On the other hand, if you want free advice from an investor, ask them for money, and they will give you tons of free advice. But more specifically, investors want to feel involved. That's the reason that they want to give you advice and see you take it, because they want to feel meaningful themselves. Money has no meaning. In fact, some would argue that life itself has no meaning. And so we need to give things meaning. There are 3 golden rules. You know, I read a lot of science fiction. Asimov had 3 rules for robots, which no one's implemented, which is a shame if you looked at the AI panel. Fortunately, we have no artificial sentience yet, so we're not going to die. But it would be nice to implement the don't harm humans rule into AIs. But nevertheless, those 3 rules of robotics, there's actually 3 golden rules of startup. These are the 3 golden rules. Don't quit, don't die, don't suck. Now, the don't quit is probably obvious, right? As a startup founder, I can tell you that I make more mistakes than most other people. Don't quit means fail a lot, make tons of mistakes, allow yourself the permission to screw up multiple times a day as you figure shit out. Because if your business is new and no one's done it before, then a lot of the rules don't apply. I mean, there are some basic rules like, don't abuse your staff, but other than that, most of the business rules probably don't apply. So don't quit might be obvious. Don't die should also be fairly obvious. It's amazing to me how many people create these new startups and they say, right, we're going to do this, this, and this, and that's a lovely big vision, and they put nothing in underneath it to make it actually become a reality. Right? My job consists a lot of the time of telling people no. The number one reason I have for telling people no is because they don't have any builders. They don't have any engineers, they don't have any technicians, they don't have any coders. They're not going to build something, and they're going to die. It is absolutely certain in my mind they're going to die, because they're never going to build enough to invest in. That's a huge part of don't die. Don't die is not just run out of money, it's running out of value creation. It's like this. Somebody tells you, I'm going to start a fantastic new restaurant. You're like, yes, that sounds great. The architect is going to be Frank Gehry. Wow, he's famous. The front of house used to work for Buckingham Palace. Ooh, posh. And the sommelier used to work for Chateau Mouton Rothschild. Ooh, fine tasting wine. The waitstaff are former catwalk and runway models. Well, that's not going to be unpleasant. Tell me, who's the chef? Oh, we're outsourcing the food to McDonald's because we got a really cheap price. That's the end of that restaurant. It's the same with startups. If you have no doers and builders, you're going to die. So don't quit, don't die. But here's the really important one. Don't suck. And it's very hard not to suck. Suckage is that interesting combination of a lack of market awareness, a lack of demand, a lack of design, a lack of meaning. And yet I see a lot of people who are setting themselves up to suck. Now, having actually sucked, like I've had a startup that failed brilliantly, and what we sucked at was we built a solution to a problem that didn't exist. We built a high-tech chip that would sense hand movements in 3 dimensions. Very cool, very sci-fi. But back at the time we did it, no one needed it. There weren't VR goggles. There weren't, 3D touch displays. There weren't anything that could use that. So even though our technology was amazing, it sucked. But there are a lot of other ways to suck. One of the most successful industries in terms of volume of money is the futures trading industry. But a lot of that industry sucks because all it does is take value out of society rather than create value for society. Now, if you have no meaning in your life, that's a great way to make money. It's actually pretty low risk, it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty easy, but it really sucks. It sucks value out of the rest of society. So I prefer to invest in things that are actually going to create value for society, because that's one of the things that I made up is meaningful. I'll give you an example. I run an accelerator program. It's called Rebel Bio. I'm not a biotechnologist, right? I'm a tech entrepreneur and investor. But 4 years ago, I saw that one of the great ways not to suck was to invest in things that would make impossible stuff inevitable. That's actually our fund motto, by the way. That's our purpose. We make impossible things inevitable. When I looked at biotechnology at the time, I realized that we're in the throes of a great change. What was impossible a few years ago because the technology wasn't there was suddenly abundant. And we have companies that have been through our accelerator, even like Alternative Plants, sitting over there, Latvians, right, that leverage this new technology to not only make money and make products, but also to help save the environment at the same time. They don't suck. There's meaning in what they do. That's an investable proposition. But you don't actually have to be a tech startup to not suck. One of the things that I created is a charity called Coderdojo. It's an organization that is completely free, where kids can come and meet up every week and learn how to program computers. And it's totally free. There's no, free forever free. And we started Coderdojo 6 years ago in one location in Cork, Ireland. And we got it right, because now there are 1,500 locations in 78 countries, and it's still all free. It doesn't suck, because kids are going and learning really powerful stuff totally for free. We started that with a purpose of actually giving kids, any kids, access to the power of coding technology, which underpins everything. By the way, DNA is digital. You can actually code life now. So if you learn to code now as a young kid, you have a career. You have a future. So we built that, and it doesn't suck because it grew. Because thousands of kids are learning to code. And any one of you could start up a Coderdojo tomorrow because it's completely open source and scalable. And as I said, completely free. So it's possible to apply this to a lot of different areas. Now, I might say, at Coderdojo, we certainly had to go through the don't quit and don't die phase. Because we didn't use money, it was very hard not to die. Right? We relied on a lot of generosity of people donating spaces, donating equipment, donating their time. But if you can make it meaningful enough, people will do that. If you can design meaning into your product, people will give up their time for free. And I mean expensive people, like computer programmers, highly paid people, will give up their time for free if you can bake meaning in. I can tell you that in Coderdojo, the nicest thing I ever heard was someone was asked, a little kid was being asked in the background when I was preparing for an interview, they were asked, "What do you love the most about Coderdojo?" And the kid said, "Oh, I love that my wheelchair is invisible here." Now that to me meant something. That's meaning that I didn't create, but it came in from the people who are participating. So another huge part of the meaning of your product, of your service, of your charity, of your startup, of the investments you're going to make is collecting the meaning. It's another part of don't suck, right? I see a lot of people ignore their customers, ignore their participants, ignore the messages that are out there. Collect them, share them, recreate that meaning. And whatever you do, look for that meaning and how you be about it. Because you can design the meaning to some degree, but the one thing you get to choose is how you be about it. So I could come up here, for instance, and I could choose a way of being that would suck. Like I could choose to be angry at you all. And there would be less happiness in the world and you would rate me very poorly as a speaker. Or I could choose to be kind or inspirational or interesting. Any of those forms of being make me a better speaker. So look at what your startup, organization, conference means and look at how you be about that. Any of that making sense? I hope so. Makes sense to me at least. Anyway, that's the last of the facts. A lot of time people come to me and they ask me, how do I get my first investment? So, of course, my question back is, do you have anybody who's building anything? Right? The thing I love about alternative plants is they're all scientists. They're all builders. You come to me with a team like that, that's easy. But they still need to know, how do I get investment? Well, the answer is, make me care. Right? As an investor, I want to care. Of course I want to see that there's going to be a return on my investment. Of course I want to see that there is, viability. But to care, I need to see that you're doing something in the world that's big enough to care about. It's only then that I'm going to actually really look at investing. Part of caring, by the way, is taking my fear away as an investor. Now, we run accelerator programs. We get hundreds of applicants for each program, and we can only take a very few. So beyond making me care, you also want to make sure that you've made enough progress that we can accelerate you. A lot of people come to me with ideas, and they say, I've got a great idea. And I'm like, that's good for you. Please don't share it with me. Because ideas actually have an opportunity cost that's higher than their value. You can't patent an idea, and ideas really don't actually have any meaningful value. But if somebody comes to me and they say, I had an idea, and I built this thing, and these people love it, then I can do something for you. Then I can assist you to make that mean more. Then I can assist you with money to make that scale. Then I can accelerate you. And that doesn't really matter what the area is, but I'm particularly interested in biotechnology because the current state of biotechnology is important to humanity as fire was. You know, the current state of biotechnology is going to change everything. It's like the computer industry was back in the 1970s, when there were like a small number of computers in the world and nobody thought they were important. And the next year and the next decade, they became everything. Like you all got computers covering you. We are getting really close with biotechnology to that science fiction that I loved. We're getting really close to that being the most meaningful technology that humanity has ever wielded. And so that's why I'm particularly in love with biotech startups. But regardless, you know, do something meaningful. Whether it's philanthropic or not, add some meaning. And lastly, when you look at all the ways to be, consider this way to be. Be kind. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Bill. Do we have some questions? We still have some time.
I know you want to get to the drinks.
Yes.
Hey, by the way, here's a tip. Here's a tip. Put your hands up if you have a startup. Okay, good. Now, keep your hands up, like you've got your startups, right? Now, as a startup, you want stuff, right? So this is your best opportunity to get attention. Ask the first question. Don't leave me sitting here with crickets chirping. Put your hand right up and say, pick me, I've got a great question. And then, when you say your question, tell us who you are and what your startup is, and get free publicity. All right? Don't just do the Eastern European thing of sitting on your hands. So, are there any questions?
Yes, there are. So let's throw the mic.
So thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask, what does it take to start the Coderdojo, for example, here in Baltics?
To start a Coderdojo, very simple. You go to coderdojo.org and you click Start a Dojo. And it's really hard, the UI is quite complicated. You click Start a Dojo and you follow the registration steps and you get to download a PDF document. And that will tell you everything you need to know. It's super easy. And like we have 30 dojos in Cork now. Like, Latvia could have at least, 50 dojos if you wanted your kids to actually grow up productive and smart. Good question. Any others? No? You've got a startup. You've got a
Well, thanks, Bill. I wanted to discuss and get your comment about what is the main turning point, for example, in synthetic biology. What is the role of building those communities? Because, of course, in such a technologically expensive things, investment means a lot. But could you comment if investment is the main thing just to make it increase and bring this reality this revolution, or it's also like building a strong societies and strong communities in this field?
I think it's definitely community first. I mean, right now, a lot of biotechnology is stuck in universities, but there are also an increasing number of biomaker and biohacker movements. And so the more people create community labs and start to just play with the technology, I mean, the computer industry didn't take off until people started doing it in their garages. Well, it's actually possible now to do biology in your big garage. You can actually start to do things with cell-free technology and other technology. You can actually do meaningful experiments on your kitchen table that could lead to a startup. So creating community around that, I think, is huge. Well, cell-free technology is not regulated at all, so you go around regulation, right? Anyway, you had a question. Right, so
hello.
Stand up, say who you are and what your startup is.
My name is Lolita, and actually this week we are about to create this company, which is going to be under quite big company. And this is where the problem comes. It's a startup, it's a completely new thing, it's a product, technology together with bio things and things like that. It's all very beautiful. But because it's new, we don't know how to create the plan for it, as well as to decide who is going to be a leader of it, because there's this mother company trying to regulate the things while we are this group of young people fighting against their standards. And that's the question, how, in this kind of case, when we are not independent, a startup group, how to create this relationship, because we need them. They have money, experience, but they're afraid.
So startup is really hard, and startup when you've got a bad parent is impossible. So you need to actually teach them how to be a good parent, or you need to go and do it without them. Like you actually need to figure it out without them. That may be the choice, or you need to give them really good parenting lessons. It's really, really hard to do a startup anyway, and if they're a bad parent, you're never going to actually end up with a company that's investable, because they will always be in the way of future investment in your growth. They can't help it, especially if they're coming from a place of fear. You know, a startup needs to be a place of inspiration and, you know, massive amounts of fun for it to happen. You know, I don't know very many startups that live for very long if everyone is terrified. And if your parent company is terrified, that's a big problem.
We have just different visions of how we should do it.
Yeah, you say that. We have just got different visions of how we should do it. And that sounds like a very nice little sentence. There is a chasm between you. It's deep. There are rocks at the bottom.
So what we want to make it work together.
Yeah, so you've got to get them to be a good parent. You've got to get them to have exactly the same vision as you. You've got to get them to believe in what you're doing. That means you need to create something that means the same to them as it does to you and your customer.
Thank you.
Welcome. Up the back. Throw it! Thus proving that nerds like myself can't catch.
Let's check how the boombox keeps beating.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Ilon. I'm with a startup Gigiblocks. We are Lego, only big cardboard blocks. You actually can see our product as a built Christmas tree on the first floor where the green innovation lounge.
Yep.
And my question is regarding mistakes and failing as a startup. We have a lot of those in a way. So once you approach investor, how do you speak about it? How do you put a positive spin on it?
Okay, so don't put a positive spin on your mistakes. Right? Tell investors all the ugly things that you've done and failed at, but make sure you tell them what you learned.
Okay.
Right? Because a mistake is only bad if it, A, kills you, which breaks the don't die rule, or B, you don't learn from it. Now, the fact that you're still here means you're not dead, so that's a good thing. It's great to tell investors what you learned. Every mistake that goes out there that you learned is an assumption that you take away out of the investor's assumption base. Because all investors approach everything with a whole bunch of assumptions. You know, I could assume that, your blocks need to be bright pink, right?
Yeah.
That could be an assumption. And you could say to me, we tried pink blocks and no one liked them. And then we tried purple ones and everyone loved them. And then I know that you actually did the work. You see, a mistake that you tell me you learned from and you tell me what you learned is the work. That's actually part of the creative process. That's part of the most valuable piece of your intellectual property. And as an investor, I want to hear that. So that's how I do it.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I think that we are all desperate to get some drinks.
Yes, go on, go drink.
So thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
It was Bill Mio from Australia, Ireland, representing the global venture capital firm. So thank you very much,
Thank you.
and let's catch up today and tomorrow later on.